For most of my life, I thought work was like a rope that kept me steady, but now I see it slowly tied knots around parts of me I didn't notice at the time. I'm 80 years old now, and I've spent over 60 of those years working, showing up, staying useful, and doing what needed to be done. When you work that long, you don't just earn money or respect, you start shaping yourself around what the work demands. I didn't question it when I was young because everyone around me lived the same way. You wake up, you go where you're needed, and you measure your day by how much you handled. That becomes normal. Over time, it becomes invisible. I told myself I was being responsible, and I was, but responsibility has a way of quietly becoming identity if you're not careful. By my 40s, people knew me by what I did, not by how I felt or what I needed. I accepted that gladly because it felt solid. It felt earned. I didn't think about who I was outside of that role because there was always another task waiting. When work fills your days, it also fills the space where reflection might live. I see that clearly now, but back then clarity wasn't something I was looking for. I was looking for stability, and work gave me that. It also taught me to stay composed, to push through tiredness, and to postpone questions about myself. Those questions don't disappear, they just wait. They wait until the noise slows down. They wait until the body can't move as fast as the mind once did. At 80, with my days quieter and my hands slower, those questions finally have room to speak. And the first thing I've had to face is this simple truth. I spent decades becoming someone reliable, but I didn't always notice who I was becoming in the process. The next truth no one prepares you for is how gradually you disappear into what you're good at. I didn't wake up one day and decide to trade myself for my work. It happened in small choices that felt sensible at the time. I stayed late instead of going home early. I took pride in being the one people could count on. I learned how to keep my emotions steady because feelings slowed things down. That steadiness earned trust, promotions, and quiet approval, and I welcomed all of it. But every time I chose efficiency over presence, I trained myself to stay one step removed from my own life. I told myself I'd rest later, enjoy later, figure myself out later. Later kept moving further away. By the time I was 50, my days ran smoothly, but I couldn't tell you what I truly enjoyed anymore. I knew my routines better than my own thoughts. Work gave me structure, but it also gave me a script, and I followed it without reading the fine print. At home, I was tired in a way sleep didn't fix. I listened, but I didn't linger. I was there, but not fully available. That wasn't cruelty. It was habit. Habits shape you quietly, without asking permission. They turn choices into reflexes. When people thanked me for my dedication, I felt proud, but something in me stayed distant. I didn't have language for that distance back then. I only knew how to keep going. Years later, when the pace slowed, I realized how much of my inner life I had left unattended. Work had answered many questions for me, but it never asked who I was becoming when no one needed me anymore. That question waits patiently. It always does. And when it finally shows up, it doesn't shout. It sits down beside you and waits for an honest answer. The third realization came when work finally loosened its grip on my days. Retirement didn't arrive like freedom the way I once imagined. It arrived like quiet. Suddenly, there were hours with no clear purpose attached to them, and that unsettled me more than I expected. For 60 years, my value had been easy to measure. You finish a job, solve a problem, meet a deadline, and the day makes sense. Without that structure, I felt oddly unfinished, like a tool left on a table with no task. That's when I began noticing how often I introduced myself by what I used to do. It slipped out naturally, as if my past still needed to justify my presence. When people asked how I spent my time, I hesitated. I had filled my life with work so completely that I hadn't practiced being still without feeling useless. The quiet exposed things I had postponed for decades, old interests I never returned to, conversations I rushed through, parts of myself that didn't fit neatly into a productive schedule. I wasn't angry about it. I was surprised by how unfamiliar I felt to myself when no one was waiting on my output. That's when the untangling began. I started asking simple questions I had avoided because they didn't serve efficiency. What do I actually care about now? What kind of man am I when I'm not being evaluated? What parts of me were shaped by choice and which were shaped by necessity? These questions don't have quick answers. They require patience, and patience is something work rarely teaches you to practice inwardly. At 80, I don't ask these questions to rebuild my life. I ask them to understand it honestly. There is a difference. Understanding doesn't demand correction. It asks for clarity. And clarity, even when it arrives late, has a way of settling the mind. That's when I realized I wasn't empty without work. I was simply unfamiliar territory to myself. And unfamiliar doesn't mean broken. It just means unexplored. As I kept untangling who I had become, I started seeing the cost more clearly, not with anger but with accuracy. Work had trained me to value myself when I was needed, not when I was present. That lesson followed me everywhere. I measured my worth by usefulness, by output, by whether I was solving something. When those measures faded, I had to learn a harder truth. Being alive is not the same as being useful. No one told me that when I was young because usefulness is rewarded loudly. Presence is quiet. I look back now and see moments where I chose reliability over closeness, not because I didn't care, but because I didn't know another way to live. I thought showing up meant doing, fixing, providing. I didn't understand that sometimes showing up means staying still and letting someone else be seen. That realization didn't come with regret sharp enough to hurt. It came with a steady weight, like acknowledging a fact you can no longer argue with. I don't try to rewrite those years in my mind. They made me who I am, including the limits I now see. At 80, you stop chasing a better version of the past. You start making peace with the truth of it. I see now that work gave me discipline and resilience, but it also narrowed my attention. It taught me to focus forward, not inward. That focus helped me survive, but it also delayed my understanding of myself. There are parts of me I'm meeting for the first time in old age. They aren't dramatic or impressive. They're simple. They're quieter than the man I used to be. And strangely, they feel more honest. I no longer need to prove anything to listen to them. I no longer need to justify my existence with productivity. That shift didn't happen all at once. It happened when I finally accepted that my life wasn't meant to be measured only by what I built, but also by what I ignored while building it. Now, at 80, I live with a different kind of attention. I don't rush to fill my days the way I once did, and I don't judge myself for the quiet. The untangling is still happening, but it no longer feels urgent. It feels necessary. I see clearly now that work shaped me, but it didn't define all of me, even when I let it take the lead for so long. There is a version of myself that existed beneath the schedules and responsibilities, waiting patiently. That version didn't disappear. He was simply set aside. When I listen to him now, I hear things I once ignored. A slower rhythm, a steadier sense of what matters and what doesn't. I don't condemn the years I spent working. They fed my family, gave me purpose, and taught me endurance. But I no longer confuse endurance with identity. That confusion cost me time with myself, and time is the one thing age makes very clear. You don't get it back. All you can do is meet yourself honestly where you are. I speak this aloud now because silence kept me busy for a long time. If you're listening to this, it means you stayed with me long enough to hear an old man sort through his truth. That matters more than you might think. If any part of this sounded familiar, you don't need to explain it. You don't need to fix it either. Sometimes it's enough to recognize yourself in someone else's words. If you feel like sharing what stayed with you, I'll be here to read it. Speaking this has made the quiet lighter for me, and that, at this age, feels like enough.